I'm really stoked to have these albums out in the world finally. It was like giving birth to two giant babies, and it literally destroyed me physically for 6 months afterwards. I won't blame the albums.
I'm Tim Ledin. Shelby, thank you for joining us today on Ghost Cult Mag. Big news. You guys just dropped a double release last week from 20 Bucks Spin. You dropped Anthronomicon and Helionomicon. First question right off the cuff. What made you guys want to drop a double release versus one now, 6 months from now?
I mean, we just wanted to do something different, really. That's kind of what we like to do as a band, is just do stuff that maybe doesn't make sense or is different from what people would expect. And we started working on the material early in the pandemic. We all had a lot of free time on our hands, so we just started producing like massive amounts of music and songs, and just thought, wouldn't it be cool to just drop two separate albums on the same day? It's kind of weird, you don't see it a lot, and so that's what we did.
Yeah, and they're definitely two very different yet similar, because it's obviously underneath the Ulthar name. I've listened to, I think it's the Helionomicon one. That's the one with the two tracks that are like 20 minutes each.
Yeah.
Just a whole different take on death metal, which is really cool to see. Almost like a yin and yang of what Ulthar is dropped on the same day. So it was really something interesting for me, and I just had to ask that first for sure.
Yeah.
Ulthar being of the Lovecraftian origins, these album titles, to me, I immediately think about Necronomicon, obviously, Evil Dead, obviously it's H.P. Lovecraft. But where are these titles also from a Lovecraft background, or are these more so creations from your own mind?
I'm glad you asked that, because it's kind of an inside joke with the band. We don't really have any lyrics or anything about Lovecraft. Like, we have the imagery from Ian Miller, and there's nothing specifically Lovecraftian about his art either, but it looks so eldritch and so like ancient cosmic horror-y that, everybody pins us as a Lovecraft band, but really there's no Lovecraft content in the music. And when we started thinking about that, Providence, the title of our last album, was kind of a joke, because it's like Lovecraft was born in Providence, but the song Providence has nothing to do with that. So it's kind of like we were baiting people to think of us as a Lovecraft band still. And it was kind of the same thing with Anthronomicon and Helionomicon. It was like those words sound like Necronomicon, but if you actually break down the like etymology of the words, one means the book of man, one means the book of the sun. And that's it. There's no Lovecraft connection, but we kind of like fuck with people and trick them into thinking that, because it's already an established thing, I guess, and it's just kind of silly to keep playing along with it.
That's great. I honestly didn't think anything Lovecraftian looking at the artwork, but obviously doing a quick Google of Ulthar, it's like, oh, this city where everyone loves cats, and it's an H.P. Lovecraft book. I'm like, oh, cool. I love Lovecraftian like influenced art,
and I do too. Yeah. And at the beginning, like, that was, I was reading a lot of Lovecraft, and I saw that name. I can't remember which book I was reading. It pops up in a couple of his books, but I saw the name Ulthar, and I was like, that's like, sounds like a fucking heavy, gnarly name. And I looked it up, and at that point, at least, I looked it up on Metal Archives, and no one had used it yet. Now there's a couple bands, but we were just like, oh shit, we should take that. It's never been used, so we did. It wasn't because we were like necessarily like paying obeisance to Lovecraft or whatever. It's just like, oh shit, that sounds cool. We should take that before somebody else does, and that's kind of where it all started from.
Nice. Well, you tricked me really good. So did Google. So
yeah, I mean, we get hit with that label constantly, and I'm fine telling people about it, because it's gonna stick around forever, no matter what I say, anyways.
That's good. You mentioned Ian Miller. His artwork has been it's fantastic. Just long and short of it. What I liked about this double release is that if you hold the two album artworks together, it makes one big portrait. Was that always something that wanted to be done with the double release, or was this more like he did one and then you guys were like, let's jump to do the second release on the same day, the double release? Ian, what can you do to kind of expand this picture out for us?
No, we specifically asked him to create the piece that way. This was the first, and we conceived this whole thing from the beginning. We kind of knew like the song lengths and everything, how we were going to do it. Like it was conceived this way from the beginning, and the art was conceived that way. I asked Ian for a piece. Initially, what I asked him for, and it was a shot in the dark. I was like, this is probably too crazy, but I was going to see if he could do something where not only did they fit together this way, but you could move one here, and then it would just repeat forever, like a Escher sort of thing. But I think that, I mean, it blew my mind to even think of that, much less have him try to draw it. So yeah, this was the first time we actually commissioned a piece from Ian and had a little bit of say in the color palette. You know, we pretty much just let him go nuts. But you know, our first two albums were existing pieces that we licensed, and this was the first time we actually got to like commission something and ask him for something specific. But that was the idea from the beginning, was one big piece that splits down the middle. And if you get both albums, each of them comes with a poster inside of the full piece. So if you only buy one album, you're still going to get the full piece inside.
That's a great deal. And think of it this way: now you have two posters if you get both of them.
Yeah, you can throw one away.
Nah, one goes in the living room, one goes in the office.
The other one goes on eBay. Yeah.
Oh, eBay. I hope not. God. I hate asking this question because I feel like you probably get hit with a lot. Considering that this was a double release, did you have a lot of different approaches in terms of recording and producing this compared to something like, you know, Providence, which is a straightforward, we're making one album and releasing it?
Yeah, we did pay attention to that in the studio. Like we recorded everything in sequence basically, and changed the production a little bit between the two albums. It's not super upfront. It doesn't sound like a different band or anything, but we did things like Steve, our bass player, played a different bass that sounded a lot different. He played like an aluminum neck bass on one album, and a regular wood neck bass on the other album, and traded out snare drums on albums between the two albums. So like, yeah, we were paying attention to try and, little details here and there to make it sound a little different.
Gotcha. Which ones really stand out, at least to you, in terms of the recording, the overall sound and everything?
That's a good question. So the way that we split this up, the band is a three-piece. There's Justin Ennis, the drummer, Steve Peacock, the bass player, vocalist, and myself. I play guitar and I sing. But me and Steve, basically, it didn't always work like this, but now basically he writes half the songs and I write half the songs. So we each wrote 4 songs for Anthronomicon. We each wrote one of the long songs for Helionomicon. So I really would have much more insight on the songs that I wrote. I love Steve's songs. I think Steve's songs are probably better than my songs, between me and you and everyone watching this or reading this. But it's hard to say production wise what stands out, because it was just like a mind melting process to get all this stuff. We did it all in 15 days, and it was a lot of like tracking a bunch of drums and then going back and tracking guitars and then going back and finishing the drums and then going back and doing more guitars. So at least from the production end of things, everything is like mashed together in my head, like trying, just the prospect of recording 2 like 20-minute death metal songs, on top of an entire album in 2 weeks is just mind numbing. There was a point where we were also, I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic, but
no, go for it.
We were also like, I live in Virginia, right outside of DC, and we were recording in Baltimore. So we were like commuting 2 hours a day and then spending like 8 to 10 hours in the studio. So the whole process was just bonkers. Sound wise, I think that Cephalophore is probably my favorite of my songs that I wrote on the album. I think I really like the like riding into battle sort of feeling that that song has. And of Steve's songs, I think Astronumeral Octave Chants is pretty insane. It was almost impossible for me to like play that shit on guitar. He wrote all of it, and it's really sometimes it's really difficult for me to play Steve's songs. But once I did it, I was like, damn, that is a fucking, it's a finger twister, you know?
That's got to be quite the challenge. It's one thing to write a riff that you're like, wow, this one was really hard to hit, but then have someone else write it for you and then doesn't play it on the recording, goes, nah, you got it.
And he also, a funny thing about Steve is he plays, not only does he play bass with his fingers with no pick, but he plays guitar with his fingers with no pick too. So the stuff that he writes is like, it's like an octopus wrote it. And oh look, my other cat's here. I told you he'd interrupt us. Yeah, he's got squid fingers, man. And so when you have to translate from like finger picking something where he's maybe doing like two things at a time to doing it just with a pick, that there's a learning curve there. It's like it's pretty crazy. Steve's a maniac.
In all the best ways, apparently.
Yeah, no, for real. He's fucking awesome.
It's awesome to hear. So regarding the product out here, it dropped last Friday. Essentially, you guys are hopefully going to be touring on this double release at some point. Really, two-stage question. One, are there any songs of your own or Steve's that you're looking forward to playing live? And then how are you going to get these to translate, especially if you do the Helionomicon songs? Because I feel like 20-minute songs might be a little bit for people, although I've also seen Sleep a few times and they've played most of Dope Smoker, so who knows?
That's a good question. We were talking right before you started recording. I was just out in California, just kind of running through old songs with Ulthar and new songs, you know, songs off Anthronomicon and Cosmic Forward, Providence, all the albums, because we hadn't played together in a while. We're on separate coasts now. And yeah, I mean, when we do get back to playing live, which we should circle back and talk about that more later maybe, but we had a lot of fun playing the new songs. Like there's a lot of songs on Anthronomicon that are a blast to play. They're hard, but they're like rewarding, you know, like if you can get through the song, it's like, holy shit, that was rad. But also just going back and playing songs off like Cosmivore off our first album, we hadn't played them in years together, and it was like, holy shit, these songs are rad too. We kind of forgot about them. So I'm looking forward to playing everything live. As far as like Anthronomicon and Helionomicon go, I don't know if we're ever gonna play those live. I would love to, but like it would take months for us to like actually get rehearsed enough that we could play those on stage. What we've done in the past actually is I don't know if you're familiar with our first album, Cosmivore, but there's like a 13.5-minute song on that album. And what we kind of did was we were playing a lot of like half-hour sets, opening for other bands and stuff on tour. And so we kind of edited that song down to like, I think it was like 9 minutes or something. So we took out parts that repeated 3 times on the album. We edited it down to like 2 times in the song when we played it live. So I don't know if that would be shortchanging the audience, but that's kind of how we've dealt with stuff in the past, because it can be kind of like exhausting, I think, to an audience to play these super long epic songs. And it's kind of, in a live setting, it's kind of more fun to like keep things moving and keep throwing like different material at people.
I guess on the other side of that dagger is if you have fans that are like, oh, I love this song, like they're actually playing it, holy shit. And then it's, as opposed to 20 minutes, it's like 11. They're like, whoa, hold on.
Yeah. You left out my favorite riff.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is a double-edged sword. And somebody asked me in an interview the other day about like, would we play Anthronomicon and Helionomicon together live? And I was like, that's the other thing. Like, I don't want to sit through an 80-minute set. You know, I don't know anybody that wants to sit through anyone playing an 80-minute set. So yeah, it's kind of it's a fine line to walk. So we we haven't really discussed it that much at this point. It was a labor of love to even get it out into the world. So like figuring out how to actually pull it off live is a whole other ordeal. But I'm sure we'll get around to it someday.
Fair enough. Just make sure you come up to the Northeast. I'll be there for
All
sure.
right. Yeah, absolutely. We had great shows up there in Massachusetts in the past. So yeah, we can't actually book any tours right now because I just recovered from throat cancer.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I was diagnosed in June of last year, and I was treated via radiation and chemotherapy in August and September, and I've recovered really well. Like it appears that it's like cleared up and in remission and et cetera, et cetera. Like all my tests look good and stuff, but my voice is kind of like the last thing to recover. That like I there was a point when I completely lost my voice for like a couple weeks, but I'm working my way back up to it now. I actually just got referred to a speech therapist today at Johns Hopkins, who's a former opera singer, and I figure if there's anyone that can help me on my path, it's going to be this lady,
Absolutely.
But, yeah, I've been working on it a lot. I've been like doing a lot of like exercises and running a humidifier in my room, doing all these different things. I stopped drinking coffee because that dries out your vocal cords. So I've been working on it a lot already, but I'm not quite there yet. And it's frustrating because we're getting tour offers, and it's like I don't know when I'm going to be better, so we can't say yes until I'm able to actually do the thing.
Absolutely. Wow. I
Yeah,
thought I did some pretty good research. I did not hear about this. That's
yeah. Well, I'm.
wow.
It's not like I'm not like. I'm kind of a hermit. I'm not like a social media person or anything, so I don't expect people to have heard about it or anything. It's just shit that happened in my life. But yeah, that's it. It was diagnosed basically like right after we finished recording these albums, and that was the first time I even noticed discomfort, was recording the vocals for these albums. I started getting like a sore throat, and it didn't go away. So that was kind of like the start of the whole journey, was these two albums. So it feels pretty like inextricably linked to me.
Yeah, it's I'd almost say the album recording process kind of saved you.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it helped me notice it. And there was a point in the recording, or in the process of recording, where I was in the vocal booth and I had just started tracking my vocals, and Justin and Steve were in the control room, and they were like, "Your voice sounds weird, man. Like you're in the wrong range or something." And I listened back, and I was like, yeah, my voice does sound weird, So I sort of like just worked on it more and more until I got it into the range where I wanted it. But that was the first time where I was like, oh, that is weird. Like my voice sounds off. And it, here we are like almost a year later, and it still does. So hopefully it'll be back soon. It's hard to say.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that I'm glad I found out news via talking to you directly versus being some footnote in a Wikipedia article somewhere, because that'd have been obviously fucking terrible.
Yeah.
So glad you're still here. Glad you're on the mend, and you'll get there. I'm sure you will.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, like I said, I've come a really long ways already. So I have good expectations for the future or whatever. Things have gone okay so far, so I just hope I stay on that same trajectory.
For sure. So I was looking into all three of you really are in a bunch of different projects. Do you find that there are influences from your previous projects that kind of find their way into Ulthar when you're in the recording process, or it's in the creative process?
It's more of a separate thing for me, at least. Like the way I look at different projects and playing in different bands, it's like when I'm writing for a band, like I'm writing for that band. There's no it's not like I could take Ulthar riffs and be like, oh, this is a Vastum song. Like it's all different parts of my musical personality expressing themselves, so I do tend to keep things separate in my mind. And when I'm working on one project, I'm focused on that project. I'm writing songs for that project. And then, the album comes out, maybe there's some touring, and then after that, you move on to the next thing and you're working on that for a while. So yeah, there's not a lot of mental crossover for me, I don't think.
Interesting. Yeah, it's kind of a 50-50 shot. I like to see how people kind of respond to it. So, but yeah, with a wide variety of projects that you've been related to or have been part of, I could, yeah, like you said, you don't take an Ulthar riff and kind of go, here you go, toss over here.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's like I kind of made it sound like I'm just doing the one thing but I'll stop and like take a break and work on something for another band and write a song and set that aside, for another project. So when I circle back to that, then, it's there waiting for me or whatever.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So let's say Ulthar's opening for a co-headline tour. Who are those two headliners?
Defeated Sanity and Dead Congregation.
Oh, wow.
That would be my dream tour.
That'd be something.
Justin and Steve would totally not agree with that, but actually they might with Dead Congregation, but they're not into like brutal death metal like I am.
Yeah. Fair enough. That is all right. No, Defeated Sanity and Dead Congregation in Ulthar's opening. All right. Yeah. So once Shelby feels better, book it. Let's make it happen.
If you guys are listening, Defeated Sanity and Dead Congregation, you're on my list.
We'll make it happen.
Right.
And I got one more for you. So when you were on tour, do you find yourself kind of listening to music that it kind of surrounds the genre you're playing in, or do you just kind of go all over the place? Because I'm sure listening to death metal nonstop for a month or so might get old for you. Or
we hardly ever listen to death metal in the van. It's like you start getting so saturated by it that we usually listen to, like, me and Steve are like big like krautrock and prog rock nerds, so chances are we're going to be listening to like Popol Vuh or like King Crimson or some obscure European prog. But yeah, you can't, if you have an 8 or 9 hour drive to go play a death metal show, it's kind of like after the first day or two, the last thing you want to do is listen to death metal for that entire 8 hour drive to go listen to more death metal. I mean, I'm as diehard as the next guy, but I'm not that diehard.
Yeah, for sure. You have to have some mixes in there. You can't be having peanut butter and jelly every day for lunch, as much as you like it.
Yeah. Well, maybe on tour you might, but that's just because you're broke.
Very true. Very true. Well, all right. I'll leave the floor to you. Do you want to voice any comments or thoughts out to the Ghost Cult crew here?
Just thanks a lot for having me. I'm really stoked to have these albums out in the world finally. It was like giving birth to 2 giant babies and it literally destroyed me physically for 6 months afterwards. I won't blame the albums, but no, I'm stoked to have these things out in the world, and just thanks to everyone who pays attention to our music. That's about it.
Awesome. Well, Shelby, thank you so much for your time hanging out with me, talking about these 2 great albums that just dropped. They just birthed into the world, and I'm sure as time goes on, these are going to be hanging around and getting replays on a lot of people's devices. We can't really say Walkmans anymore. Like,
you can get it on tape.
Yeah, tape. Oh, there we go.